In a nice nondescript box, we're about to go old school thanks to Century Arms and their surplus corner. Let's see what's in the corner this month. Coming up next on GBGuns. So, no manufacturer box because this is an old one. Some of you may not know that I got into firearms because of Century Arms and their piles of random, interesting surplus guns from around the world. And kind of got distracted by all the modern stuff that's out there and forgotten about how cool some of the historical stuff is. So, this is from their surplus corner. We have a VZ50. This is a CZ designed in the 40s, produced from the 40s until 1970. Cool historical piece. That's what we'll be taking a look at. Obviously, you don't get an owner's manual. If you did, it would be in Czech. You do get a tag wrapped around the trigger guard warning you that it's a used firearm, which is pretty apparent. And then, of course, your trigger lock as required. One magazine in the gun. Let's get the box out of the way and take a look at the VZ50. So the VZ50 was developed after World War II with the Czechs wanting to develop another service pistol and wanting to adopt 32 ACP. 32 ACP, more on that in a bit. Neat little round, but let's focus on the gun for now. We can see that it's clear. You can also see this is a fixed barrel that lends to great accuracy. Also means this is a blowback operation, meaning the recoil from the round itself is what functions the slide, and it's held shut solely by the spring and the weight of the slide. Magazine release is up high. This is very Walther PPK-ish. You can see that even in the 40s, the Czechs appreciated magazines that eject instead of release. We have witness windows on this side. I was able to fit 9 rounds in here, 8 rounds nicely, but you've got 7 windows on just the one side. Gun came with the one magazine, and if you couldn't tell, your controls are all on this side for a right-handed shooter. You can do your mag check on this side for a right-handed shooter. Left-handeds, well, welcome to the Czech Republic in 1940. You just learn how to shoot with your right. It's not that hard. So the gun is clear. Let's take a look around the gun at these features. There's that itty-bitty barrel, 32 ACP. Fixed steel front sight post, which is part of the slide. Some crude machining here. Century Arms, of course, is the importer, and there's your markings. Now, it is kind of funny to look at it and say, oh, it says 50 cal. No, Vzor is for variant or type 50, and then the caliber is in this little circle here, and it says 7.65. That's because 7.65 millimeter is 32 ACP. In Europe, they called it 7.65 Browning. It was a very popular caliber for quite some time. No rail. Gee, imagine that. They didn't worry about tack lights or bayonets on pistols. We've got a smooth trigger guard. You can see there's some serrations on the trigger itself so that you've got a good purchase on there. A little bit of raise here to fit larger hands. This is a pretty small gun. I have very large hands and fits fairly comfortably. Magazine release is a bit of a reach, out of the way. Shielded by the grip. These are Bakelite plastic grips, so you're not going to be bumping that accidentally. Front strap is smooth. Of course, no beveling in the magazine well itself. You have some texture down where it's important, none up where you don't need it. And then this lever, which to give you a perception of how far it sticks out, not super far, is your safety and decocker. So currently the hammer is back. You can bring it down one click and you have a dead trigger. Yeah, you do have to go up to take it off of safety. A lot of people think that's backwards, but if you think of it from drawing from a holster, you're coming down and you raise your thumb as you grab onto the pistol. That's the manual of arms to get used to that. So don't get too wrapped up on that. We've got some very smooth serrations on the back. Now this smoothness is probably from the age. If you can see the stamp up here, this particular pistol was manufactured in 1962 in Czechoslovakia. Former country, hopefully you all have been paying attention. That country doesn't exist anymore. The safety is also a decocker if you come all the way down and release. Now if you leave it where it is, you have a dead trigger and hammer down. You can bring it back up, and now you've got double action. So this gives you the option of carrying a cocked and locked, or decocked with a double action first squeeze. Look around the backside, texturing, not much of a beaver tail. The gun does ride a bit high over the fist, which with 32 ACP is not really a terrible problem. So for the CZ fanboys who want something different, this is kind of fun because this is a high bore axis CZ. Slide to frame fit on this almost 60-year-old gun is still pretty darn good. Now these guns were manufactured mostly for police and government use. Some were sold to the general public. We've got an external extractor, and you might have seen that knob there. What I noticed with that extractor is if there's a round in the chamber, that knob sticks out. So now you've got a visible and tactile loaded chamber indicator on this old Eastern European gun. Pretty cool. Wish more modern guns would have that. To give you a look at the sight picture, these are tiny, tiny fine sights. Very classic 1940s-ish. If you ever picked up a GI 1911, most pistol sights of the day were like that. Do have a little bit of this serration here for anti-glare. No controls on the right side of the gun for the left-handed folks, aside from your takedown button. Now, although this looks like a PPK, Makarov, P64, pretty much everything from that era, the takedown is a little bit simpler thanks to that button. Now that we've taken a look around the gun, we'll field strip it and take a look inside. Before doing that, of course, and we already know that the gun is clear, the trigger on this is impressive. I was really surprised. So in single action with the hammer back, watch this. We have their slack and a wall and a very crisp break. Reset, of course, is not bad. You know, it's longer than a competition gun, but for an old government gun, not bad at all. Comes right back to that wall and breaks as it is. The double action is, of course, long and heavy. My guess would be at least 12 pounds, but it comes through fairly smoothly, and if you learn to be quick with it without clenching your hand, you can keep the sights level while doing that. So that's just a matter of learning the gun. Now we can field strip. So you have this takedown lever here that's spring loaded, nothing pops out the other side. You got to depress that, and you're going to take the slide back, up, and off, just like on many fixed barrel guns from the era. So I've got this pushed down with my trigger finger. I'm going to grab the slide, bring it back, up, and forward and off. That's all there is to it. This has a bit of gunk in it from a few decades of storage. I'm going to see if I can't wipe some of that out, and then we'll take a look at the machining of the gun. So I promise you, a coal miner did not just blow his nose on this rag. This is what I pulled out of the gun. And, you know, when you've got a surplus firearm like this that has sat in storage for decades, you can usually expect much worse. This wasn't in terrible condition. And when I was first getting into firearms and enjoying collecting and finding neat stuff like these guns, I looked forward to cleaning it. And I think it's where I learned a lot about the guns, because you've got to pull it apart and take a look and find the gunk and things like that. And it also helps you understand the mechanism itself. See, there's that takedown piece, because you're clearing out all that gunk. So not only is that just a good idea for general safety to take a look at any gun that's been sitting for decades and clean it, especially if it's been in long-term military government storage, but also it's a way that you can learn about your gun and usually get better results once you've taken it out to finally shoot the thing. Because a lot of that gunk that was in there, that fits in, that was coming from behind the extractor. This claw right here. Get the light on there. And guess what? If that's full with hard old crud, it's not going to grab onto the back of the casing very well. Same thing with the breech face itself, was pretty dirty, which is to be expected with a blowback gun, and that's how you increase your reliability. So it's a fun way to learn about the gun and get a closer look at some stuff. and make sure it's safe to fire. So here's our slide. The slide is kind of rough. I've got some oil on it now, but the bluing is a little worn, just some character wear on it. This part up top is kind of rough. It's a little rough cut. It's interesting that there's a difference in the cut there. I don't know what determined that. Inside you can see it's very roughly machined, but I bet you it works just fine. Here's our fixed barrel. That's going to lend itself to some accuracy because it's not shifting around at all. Feed ramp, of course, is also locked in there. And you can see how the magazine is going to present things right for that chamber. I'm very confident that when cleaned and oiled, this thing is incredibly reliable. And that's all there is to it. Springs can be worn out, can be old. So whenever you get yourself involved in a surplus piece like this, you want to be aware of that before you fire. And if you shoot it and it's terribly uncomfortable and unfriendly to shoot, then maybe you should consider finding replacements. There are plenty of companies out there that do that and offer them. I did a piece on getting some of my Makarovs back together. Jeez, now it's almost too slippery with that oil on there. To wipe some off. Yeah, there are parts out there, and that's kind of another fun thing with guns this old that were mass produced for the government, is there's generally some logistics out there for them somewhere. You just got to find it and enjoy your piece of history. Speaking of history, this 7.65 Browning, also known as 32 ACP, warrants a little bit of discussion on its own. So 32 ACP was Browning's first pistol cartridge. It was also incredibly popular at the time. I don't have a massive supply of it like I do for 9mm, so these will be the rounds we'll be running. We've got some Fiocchi 73 grain, some First Partisan, or PPU, if you will, 71 grain, and some Hornady XTP 60 grain. The Hornady is the only stuff that has velocity printed on it, and it's claiming 1,000 foot per second of these little bitty 60 grain bullets. Look at that guy. It's tiny. 32 ACP. But it was very popular. It was used in defensive use, in military, and in government use for decades. So I'm not going to knock it. It is small and light. But you know what? Shot placement is more important than the bullet. Ask any police officer or ER nurse what they've seen, who's lived through what and who hasn't lived through what. And it's more about where you can put it. So if you're comfortable and can shoot a 32 ACP really well, then I wouldn't worry about it. Now, this gun being all steel has some heft to it, much more heft than a lot of our modern polymer guns. And considering how relatively low powered this ammunition is going to feel, I'm betting this gun's going to be really pleasant and fun to shoot. It's also a neat piece of history, a little glimpse into what was happening on the eastern side after World War II, and a design that lasted in service from the 40s to 1970 before some modernizations. I can appreciate the loaded chamber indicator. I appreciate that it's got a decocker or safety, so you can run it single, double, and pretty decent capacity for a single stack. And despite the gun being overall small feeling, it fits comfortably in the hand. I don't have to worry about hammer bite, even though that beaver tail is not that huge, because the hammer is short. It doesn't stick over like on the high power. So this will be a fun one to take to the range, run through it. Hopefully it runs. I'm betting it does. And see what kind of accuracy we can get with that fixed barrel and those very tight sights using some modern ammunition. Let me know what your first classic gun was, or what classic you'd like to see. There's a lot of interesting stuff in Century's surplus corner. I love daydreaming and digging through there and trying to find stuff like this. What have you been looking for? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll get out to the range.